Hi, everybody. Fab. Hopefully, I hit a button and I heard a noise, so hopefully that has worked and everybody's joined. Cool. Lovely to see so many of you. We've still got people trickling in, which is amazing. Oh, I've had a thumbs up as well. Thank you, guys. Cool. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If any of you have not met me before, my name's Charlie. I host the Cambridge Chapter 25 Book Club, one of the newest clubs, actually only launched in May. And this is the first time I've ever hosted one of these Q&As. Claire, you are my first, which is very exciting.
I'm honoured.
But yeah, we're joined by Clare Pooley this evening, who is going to be chatting to us about some of her books, which I know some of the clubs have been reading recently. I know some of you guys have already been sending me tons of questions, which is really exciting. So there should be a Q&A box where people can add some of their questions. We've also got the Discord channel as well, where some of you have already been chatting to me and sending me some of your questions as well, which is really exciting. I've got a couple of my own questions as well. But yeah, please do use that Q&A box as we go, and the Discord channel as well. But I will get started. Claire, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself for everybody.
Sure. I'm Clare Pooley. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for asking me. And it's funny, the life of being an author is sometimes very lonely. You spend a lot of time editing where I write. I'm sitting in my kitchen at the moment and talking to you on my laptop, and this is where I sit quite a lot of the time, writing, editing, all that sort of stuff. And I spend, as a result, quite a lot of time by myself or with my dog. So having the chance to talk to people who read my books is fantastic. So thank you. Yes, I'm the author of 3 novels to date: The Authenticity Project, The People on Platform 5, which is something altogether different in the US, and How to Age Disgracefully. But my first book was actually a memoir, The Sober Diaries, which I wrote about the year I quit drinking. So that's me. Before that, I spent 25 years. Oh no, it wasn't quite that long. I'm not that old. 20 years. Quite old, but not that old. 20 years in advertising. So that's me.
Amazing. Yeah, that was something actually I found out about you while I was doing some research for today. So I will ask you about that in a bit, which is very exciting. But I thought to sort of ease us in, including me, I thought I would just go through some really quick fire questions just for people to get to know you and who you are a little bit better, Claire. So yeah, no thinking, just first thing that comes to your mind. So are you more of a morning person or are you more of a night owl?
Sorry, I'm more of a
morning person or a night owl?
Oh, definitely morning person.
Morning person.
I think when I was younger, I was a real night owl, and I hated mornings. Whereas now, I love early mornings. I get up at the crack of dawn and start writing. So yes, mornings.
Amazing. Are you a cat person or a dog person?
Dogs every time.
Dogs. You've got 2, haven't you?
I did have 2. I now only have 1.
Oh.
No, my oldest one was 16 and he died earlier this year, which was very sad.
I'm so sorry.
No, thank you. Actually, sorry, I know this is supposed to be a quick fire round, but just
that's all right. No.
I had this bio many years ago, which talked about the fact that I had 2 dogs and an African pygmy hedgehog. And I was doing this radio interview with this guy in the US. And actually I was in New York at the time, and I was in a hotel, and I was sitting doing this, this intense radio interview. And it started off, and he said, it was just this icebreaker, and he said, "So, it's great to meet you. I've been reading your book. I hear you have an African pygmy hedgehog. Tell us more about that." And I just went, "He died." And there was this deathly silence. And I thought, "Oh God, I've ruined this interview."
Oh no!
As well.
Oh no! Oh, I've never heard of it. What was it? An African pygmy? I've never heard of them before.
They're domesticated hedgehogs. Actually, it's my computer's hedgehog. And he was really cute, He was really Instagrammable. He was great. But sadly during COVID he died. And so anyway, I ruined a radio interview.
Oh, bless you. Well, we'll moving swiftly on from pets. Are you a home cooked dinner or a dinner out kind of person?
Oh God, both. I love food. It's one of my favorite things. I love cooking. I love eating out.
Nice.
Yeah, I both of those things. Couldn't choose.
Perfect. It's the way to people's hearts, definitely. A contentious one here. When I asked my Cambridge club this, it really sparked a debate. Are you an ebook or a physical book reader?
Oh, you know what? I'm an audio book reader.
Okay, nice.
So, I mean, I read physical books. I don't read much in the way of ebooks. I do sometimes when I'm on holiday. I read physical books, but that to me feels like work because most proofs that I've been sent by publishers to read. And and I spend so much time reading and writing that the only time I get to sort of read books that are already published and I'm not reading because of work is when I'm in the car, when I'm taking the dog for a walk, and I listen to them on audio. So I listen to about 2 audiobooks a week. I have an audio of about 700 books.
Oh wow. Amazing. I've really got into audiobooks this year, and for that reason I love that I can be listening and doing something really mundane. Like it just makes the mundane so much more entertaining, doesn't it?
I think if you're stressed about something, or you just want to sort of just take your mind away from real life, just going for a walk and listening to a book, it just completely sort of resets your whole mood. It's brilliant.
Agree. Amazing. Are you someone that rereads books, or are you a new book every time person?
Oh God, I don't really have time to reread books because there's so many books I would still want to read that I haven't found to yet. So yeah, if there's a reason to, sometimes I'll think, oh God, I really, especially if I'm writing something and I think, God, this reminds me of a book I read 10 years ago and I wonder how they dealt with this subject. I might go back and reread a book, but it's quite rare. Yeah.
I do have many an existential crisis about so many books, so little time. So I'm on the same page. Okay, last one. Are you someone who likes to write in silence, or do you like to write with music in the background?
Oh God, I couldn't write with any noise. Yes,
really?
I'd be really quiet. Yeah, I don't know why. I think it just takes it. I need to have total focus, I think.
Yeah.
So I can concentrate on what's going on inside my head rather than what's outside of my head. So yeah.
Everyone's
people who write to music.
Everyone's so different. I cannot be in silence. So I'm completely the opposite. Not that I'm a writer, but any sort of work I'm doing, I have to have something on in the background. So very, very different. Amazing. Cool. Well, that was a nice little intro. I feel like I know you a lot better already.
I feel warmed up now.
Yeah, good. So we can dive in. So I wanted to talk to you about your most recent book, so How to Age Disgracefully, which, like I said to you before everyone joined the call, quite a lot of our clubs have been reading recently and absolutely loving. So if we dive into this one first. So my first question for you about this book, and I think is the thing that stayed with me the most, is just how lovable your characters are. And I'm just so curious to know, where do they come from? They're all so different. They're all so quirky in their own ways. Where do you find the inspiration for these characters?
Oh gosh, interesting question. It's strange. I always start, when I'm creating characters, I don't start by thinking about what somebody's strengths are, what they're really good at, what their what their sort of great successes are. I do quite the reverse. So I look at what they struggle with, what they want to change about their lives, what's their fatal flaw, because I think people's flaws are much more interesting than their strengths, and really our flaws are what make us human. So I'll start with an idea of so to take an example, with art and How to Age Disgracefully, I was thinking about what it must be like to be somebody who all their life have been an actor, but had only ever been the sort of bit part, the person dies in the first 5 seconds in a series, and then sort of Casualty, for instance, and then has everybody sort of talking over their dead body for ages. And that was the sort of initial thought about art. And then once you've got that, which is their sort of, the thing that they really struggle with, what they change, you start, the rest of their character gets laid on in bits, and you think, how would they do this? What would they think about that? And they gradually start sort of growing in your mind. So I start from the fatal flaw and work my way out.
No, I love that. I love that. Are there any characters from, you obviously mentioned art just then, were there any characters that came to you first? Like who were your first characters, and who came a bit later?
You in any of my books, or
How to Age Disgracefully, I guess, for now, but yeah.
I think Daphne came first in How to Age Disgracefully. And I think because I was thinking about how how you feel invisible as you age. You get to a certain point and you start feeling like nobody is paying attention to you anymore. And I thought, well, actually, there would be a real advantage to that, because when they stop paying attention to you, they're not noticing some of the more subversive things that you might want to be doing. And I started thinking about, a character who actually has a lot of secrets, and the fact that age is a great way of hiding really sort of major secrets. That was really where Daphne came from.
She was I could almost hear her as I was reading the book. I really loved her character. Do you have any favorites? Any you'd, I don't know, go out for dinner with, be stuck on a desert island with?
Oh, you know what? I've lived with all of these characters for years. They live inside my head. So I feel like they're all sort of part of me in a way. And choosing between them is sort of like choosing between your children, which my children always try and get me to do, but I won't. But actually, I think one of my favorites in the most recent book is Ziggy, because I've got children his age. He's 18, a single dad, and I just I feel like kids that age get a bad rap a lot of the time, and we always see sort of, particularly somebody like him who lives on a sink estate and ends up getting embroiled with the local gangs. And it's easy to look at somebody like him and assume that he's a bad person and that he's criminal and that he's sort of, he's does drugs and he's going to rob you or whatever. And I love the idea of, Ziggy just trying his hardest to be a good dad and, do the right thing. And, it's, I'm really fond of him. And I loved writing the relationship between him and I think probably my favorite scenes in the whole book, without giving any spoilers, is when he and Daphne are in the pub.
Yes.
Towards the end, and Daphne sort of gives him a bit of a talking to, which if you've read the book, you'll know the scene I'm referring to. I loved writing that.
Yeah, he's such an interesting character. And actually, one of the questions, you've led very nicely on to one of the questions. So Sarah sent me a question, and she was saying, we've just read How to Age Disgracefully for our July book, absolutely loved it. She said, Ziggy's not a stereotypical teenage parent, and what inspired you to create that character? Did you find it difficult to get into the mindset of a single teenage father? He has many different worries compared to his peers, but I felt like you truly showcased his character's growth throughout the book.
Oh, thank you. As I said, I really love writing him, and I thought it would be really difficult because he's in a very different situation from my kids. He's had a much harder life, and I thought writing him realistically would be quite tough. But actually, I find with any of your characters, so long as once you really understand them and their motivations, you can put them in any situation and what they do will feel realistic, because sorry, that's my husband coming home. John, I'm just on a call at the moment. Sorry.
All right.
So I think it's all about really understanding your characters well enough, and then those, you can make sure that what they do feels real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like this seems to be a kind of common thread in a lot of the books that you've written, but each character is almost like a little vignette of a kind of theme, or a kind of, there's some kind of key kind of episode or kind of topic that they're going through, but they're all really, really, really varied. And I was just really curious as the process, like how much research goes into all of these different topics and fitting them in together. How do you kind of find that process when it's so varied what you're writing about?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about just being curious, you know.
Yeah.
So and I have to, you know, I have with each of my characters, even the ones that are quite dislikable, like Piers initially in the people on platform 5, you know, I find that if I can find something about them that I really relate to and that I empathize with, then you know, then I can really enjoy finding out more about their world. So you know, so with Piers, I sort of, although in a lot of ways, as I said, he was quite objectionable at the beginning. He's a sort of he's a mansplainer and a manspreader, and sort of, you know, and he's obsessed with sort of, you know, with making more money and all of those sorts of things. But you know, I knew that he was also really scared, and he found himself in a situation he couldn't deal with, and you know, and I liked him, you know, I just liked him enough to sort of go on that journey with him.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's about empathy, and having and finding something that you can empathize with each of your characters. And you can, you know, do all the research that you need to find out about their world and how they, you know, how it works.
Definitely, yeah. And I love that flip, I guess very similar to Ziggy, kind of, you know, like you said, you think you know what his character is going to be like, but he's not. And the same with Piers, like that kind of flip on its head of, you kind of assume how you're going to feel about someone, and then as the story progresses, that kind of forcing you to question that and change your mind, I think is
the research for Ziggy. I mean, I read as much as I could in terms of newspaper articles and you know, listen to podcasts and watch sort of documentaries about things like county lines and the way that the gangs work in London and all that sort of thing. But I mean, I didn't actually go out and spend time with a gang or sort of shadow anybody or sort of, you know, anything that detailed. And in the US, they use people called sensitivity readers. And when you've written a book, it goes to a sensitivity reader with an expertise in whatever area you're looking at. And they check that you haven't sort of, you know, made any really bad errors or stereotypes or whatever. And it's not so common in the UK, but it's done a lot in the US. So anyway, I sent my manuscript in, and my American editor said, "Oh, Claire, we're sending your manuscript to a sensitivity reader with expertise in gang culture, because you know, just wanted to check that the Ziggy character is accurate enough." And I thought, oh my God, this is terrible. They're going to come back and they're going to tell me that I absolutely no idea how these things work, and I'm sort of, you know, and I've made some really heinous sort of errors, and I was really nervous about it. And I waited 3 weeks, and I got this email back saying the sensitivity reader said, "Congratulations!
Oh wow!
you portrayed the whole gang culture really well." And I was sort of completely gobsmacked, to be honest.
Wow, there you go. Yeah, clearly the research all paid off then. Amazing. Are there any of the characters that you found hard? I feel like we've talked a lot about the ones that you loved and kind of, yeah, the characters that you've enjoyed writing. Were there any characters or themes or parts of the book that were a bit harder to write, maybe, or didn't come as naturally?
Oh, I mean, I think, having said that Ziggy was one of the characters I liked the best, I think part of the reason for that was because he was the hardest, because he is the one whose life is the furthest removed from mine. Yeah, I mean, and actually the complete reverse is, in a way, I found Lydia hard to write because she's the one that is most like me.
Okay.
And when you're writing a character who is in the same situation as you, so she's the same age as me, she's like me, she's sort of dealing with an empty nest, she's menopausal, you know, all of those things. Just slightly starting to feel a bit invisible and losing her sense of self. And you know, when you're writing a character who is in many ways in the same situation as you, you have to be quite careful not to make them you.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah. So I think often the characters the most difficult are the ones that are the most familiar and also the least familiar.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I'd never thought about that, but yeah, I can imagine it's blurred lines, I guess, almost when the characters are really similar to yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. The structure of How to Age Disgracefully was something that I found really interesting. So, and this isn't a spoiler for anyone who hasn't read it, but we start at the end essentially, and then we jump all the way back to the beginning again. Was that what made you choose that structure? Did you always know you wanted to do it in that way? Why did you kind of play around with the timelines a bit?
Oh, you know, I've never written a book with that structure before, and I'm not sure I would again, because it was a very specific thing. So
Yeah.
when I came up with the idea for How to Age Disgracefully, I mean, one of the inspirations was I was watching a documentary about how in the Netherlands it's quite common to find senior citizens sort of care mixed with nursery care, and they put the older people and the younger people together in a sort of environment where they sort of help each other. So the small children keep the older citizens sort of engaged and amused, and vice versa. And they sort of have started doing this in a few places in the UK as well. And I thought, God, that's really fascinating. I thought that it would be really interesting to look at a book, to write a book where you had older people, very old people and very young people thrown together. And then I had the thought that I mentioned before about how age can make you invisible, which can help hide secrets. And I thought, and I sort of had this vision of this minibus with old people and small toddlers going off on a sort of day trip somewhere, and being pulled over by the police, who are obviously looking for some sort of felon, and everybody on the bus all the older people start confessing because they think it's them that the police are after. That sort of scene was very, very vivid in my head, but I had no idea who the characters were or what they were confessing to.
Interesting.
But I knew that I wanted to get there. So I wrote that scene first, and I didn't write it in all the detail that it eventually appears, but I wrote that scene with a few older characters, and not really knowing what they'd done, but knowing they'd done something. And I knew that during that scene, one of them would escape, and I wasn't quite sure who or why. And then I started writing the rest of the book. And as I started writing the rest of the book, it became clear who those characters were and what they were confessing to and who it was that was escaping and everything else. So that by the time I got to the end again, it was all clear in my head, and I went back and rewrote the first scene. And then I could have just taken the prologue out because, it wasn't, but I thought actually it's quite fun to keep it there so that the reader goes through the same sort of journey that I did when I was writing it, in terms of about who they were and what they'd done. So yeah, so that's how it came about.
Yeah, wow, I really hadn't expected you to say that. That's fascinating. And yeah, that scene, I guess it rings true because it is such an pivotal but really kind of, you can really visualize that scene, so I can understand it rings true that you could really visualize it as well. That really comes through in the way it's written as well. But yeah, I love that you had that before you had any other characters. You just knew, and I guess maybe that's why it lent itself to being just filled with so many lovable characters, because anyone in that kind of comic situation you're going to fall in love with, aren't you, a little bit? So yeah, amazing. I love that. So very interesting question, and this was put in the chat by one of our members. Unfortunately, I've forgotten their name. Sorry, whoever this question came from. It's a very good question. They have asked, what soundtrack or song would you pick for this book?
Gosh, there have been, since I wrote it, there have been a number of songs that I've listened to, and I thought, oh, that would make a really great soundtrack. And of course, now I can't remember what any of them. Gosh, I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone has any ideas, but
stick them in the chat, guys, if you've got. I wonder if the person who asked the question had a thought
about you know, sort of being young at heart, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and age being just a number. So that,
Absolutely.
yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it would be something very upbeat and very fun, and yeah, that you can just imagine all of these characters getting up to mischief while the song's going on. Amazing. Perfect. We've just had another question come through actually in the chat about this book, so I'll go through this now while we're chatting about it. So Alexandra Veronica has put in the Q&A, so I really loved Art's growth throughout the book. What was the hardest thing about him to come up with in the creative process?
I think the hardest thing with Art was working out where his family had gone,
Yeah.
and why, because I knew he'd done something bad, because you know, because he'd done something that made his wife and child leave him and not be in touch, you know, subsequently. But because I couldn't imagine him doing anything truly awful, because I was so fond of him by that stage. So there's always that sort of, you know, I know you've done something, but I can't believe it's something truly awful. What have you done? And it took me a while. And I'm not going to say what he'd done in case, you know, for those people who haven't read it yet. But, you know, in situations like that, it sometimes takes me a while to work out exactly what somebody's background is. And sometimes I play with slightly different versions until I find the right one. So yes, I think that was the hardest thing with him. And also, you know, I always have this sort of temptation to wrap everything up neatly. You always want to give everybody a happy ending. And I think with Art, I wanted to, again, I don't want to give any spoilers, but you know, I think sometimes you can't give everyone exactly the ending you might want to, because life isn't like that, you know. So I think part of the creative process is working out who gets the happy endings and who doesn't get the happy endings, and leaving things open enough for you know, things maybe to come right in the future.
Yeah, which I suppose is natural when you've fallen in love with these characters, and like you said, they've lived with you for so long, you want to be able to put that little bow on their story and wrap it all up nicely. So yeah.
But then I think if you know, if you do that and everybody ends up with a happy bow at the end, it feels a bit saccharine and it feels unrealistic. So I had a big debate with, for those of you who've read The Authenticity Project, which is my first novel, the ending there is not all happy bows, and I had a number of big debates with editors about the ending for that book, when I was going through the whole pitch process, right at the beginning, which was quite interesting actually. So there are some editors, particularly in the US, who were really keen that everything should end happily, and you know, I was quite determined that wouldn't be right.
Yeah.
So you know, it's like, you must have read David Nichols' One Day.
I haven't. No, I've watched it. I know I've watched it, but I haven't read it. But yeah,
the ending of that book, you know, is traumatic. You know, and I remember throwing the book across the room because I was so sort of upset at what David Nichols had done. I've met him actually subsequently. He's a really lovely guy. I told him this, but you know, that is the ending that makes it so memorable, and that makes, you know, that gives you such sort of an emotional reaction. And if it had been all happy, it wouldn't have been the same book at all.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And we've had another really interesting question come through from Sarah. So we've obviously talked a lot about all the many different characters in this novel and how they all have their own kind of journeys or different stories. And she's asked, how do you keep tabs on this? Like, how do you track where each character is in their own story, their own development? What's the kind of process or technique? I love that we saw lots of point of views, but it must have been really challenging for you as an author.
Oh, you know what? I have an aversion to writing of anything down in terms of planning. So I don't write an outline or a plan or anything, and I think part of the reason for that is I sort of feel like I want to give the characters enough space to write their own story. So I have in my head a vague idea as to, I know the beginning, the middle, and the end of a book. I know a few key scenes along the way. I know who my characters are in brief, but all the details I only work out as I go along, because what I like to happen ideally is for the characters to start improvising and doing their own thing. So so I don't write down what is going to happen. And my theory is that if I forget something, it's because it wasn't interesting enough, and that the really interesting parts of the story I will remember and will come back to me as I go. So I leave it very sort of fluid, and then I just try and tie everything together as I go through. So it's very sort of loosey-goosey, if you see what I mean.
Amazing. I feel like that you must have, I don't know, an agent or a publisher who tears their hair out about that. Like, there must be people out there who are like, just give me a plan.
Well, I give them a very rough plan, because, as I said, I do know the beginning, the middle, and the end, but I always caveat it with, this may change as I go along.
Yeah.
And just give you an example, so the Authenticity Project, there's a big twist towards the end, and I haven't met anyone yet who has seen the twist coming. And I think the reason they haven't seen it coming is because I didn't know it was coming.
Yeah.
Writing it. And, I think if, as an author, you know that there's going to be a big reveal, even if you don't mean to, you accidentally drop these little clues as you go along, because your subconscious is sort of throwing in little details that you shouldn't really know. And I think as a result, as a reader, you can see that coming, because of those little sort of clues that have been accidentally dropped. Whereas in this case, I was writing away and I got to that point and I thought, oh my God, one of my characters has been completely lying to me all this. And I was absolutely furious with them. Again, not giving too many details. And I was as shocked as any of my readers were.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I love the fact that something like that can happen, because it's much more interesting for me writing a book if I don't know what's going to happen, than it is if I have it all planned out in advance. That takes the magic away.
Yeah. Ironically, it feels more authentic. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask you about your writing process, but yeah, it sounds fascinating. You said at the beginning that this, where you're sat right now, is kind of your space. You're quite a morning person. So do you have any rituals on your writing days, any kind of habits or sort of routines that you go through when it's a writing day?
Oh, well, I generally I wake up early, and like really early, about 5 o'clock in the morning. And I tend to write the next scene in my head before I even get out of bed. So I think there's a really magically sort of creative time when you're half asleep. There's a sort of liminal state where your mind is almost still dreaming, and you're not thinking logically. You're sort of able to tap into your subconscious in a way that you can't later on in the day. So I will literally lie with my eyes closed in the dark, and I will play forward the next scene in my head, almost like I'm watching an episode of some Netflix series. And as I play it forward, I will note all the details, all the sort of sights, sounds, smells, everything. And then once I have that picture in my head, I'll come downstairs to my kitchen table and I'll write it. So so I try and use that weird sort of half dream state to write the next chapter, and then in the afternoon, when I'm thinking more logically, I'll go back and I'll edit everything. So the morning is for writing new stuff, and the afternoon is for admin and editing generally.
Wow, feels very innate. It feels like it's something that's always been in you. And we talked a little bit actually before everyone joined the call about your kind of previous life before you were an author. Do you think this was always going to happen, you becoming an author? Was it, I don't know, did you have a big life plan? Was this in there anywhere, or did it just happen quite spontaneously? You going from, so for people that don't know, you started in advertising and then moved into this world of writing. Do you think it was always going to happen?
I always wanted it to. I mean, if you'd asked me when I was a teenager what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have said I really would love to write books, because I was just such a passionate reader, and it's yeah, it was always something I wanted to do. My big dream was to one day see somebody reading something that I'd written on a beach. So, and actually, I have to take, sorry, just a quick aside, but I was on a plane once, and I was walking down the aisle towards the loos, and there was this woman reading the Authenticity Project on the plane, and I just thought, I have to say something. So I said, "Excuse me," and she said, she looked at me sort of slightly alarmed. And I said, I had to interrupt you because you're reading my book. And she looked at me and she said, "No, I'm not. I bought it at the airport."
Oh, that's adorable.
which just made me laugh so much. I had to explain that I didn't mean that she's stolen it. Anyhow, now I can't remember what your question was. We were talking about,
was this always in your future?
Yeah. So I'd always wanted to be an author, but I never really thought it would happen. And then I used to write a diary when I was much younger, and I'd write sort of short stories and all that sort of stuff. But then, I started work, and I was really busy. I had 3 kids. I had a big job. I was sort of, all I wrote for years and years was PowerPoint presentations and emails and stuff. And I only really started writing again when, and anyone who has read my memoir will know this story, but I started writing again when I quit drinking, and I quit drinking 10 years ago when I realized that my sort of wine o'clock habit had got completely out of control and was slightly ruining my life. And I knew I had to quit drinking, but I was too embarrassed to talk to anybody about it. I didn't want to go to my GP. I didn't want to tell my friends or my family or go to AA or anything like that, because I was just too ashamed about the whole thing. But I sort of knew I had to get it off my chest, and I knew I had to sort of effectively try and talk about it to somebody. So I thought, well, I used to write a diary when I was younger, and that used to help in this sort of situation. So maybe I should do that, but that felt a bit old-fashioned. So I thought I'll write a blog, an anonymous blog, so nobody knows it's me, and I'm not going to publicize it. I'm just going to write it for myself. And so I started writing this blog called Mummy Was a Secret Drinker, and I sort of poured everything out of this blog. I wrote it every day, and so writing became my therapy, and it sort of kind of saved my life, really, and it became my new addiction. So so after a year, the blog had gone viral. It all went crazy. I got a publishing deal. I published the story of that year in a book called The Sober Diaries, which came out at the end of 2017. And then I thought, I want to carry on writing, but I don't want to carry on writing about my own life, because I've sort of been there, done that. And so I thought I'll just try fiction, and the rest is history, as they say. So, yeah, but I still write in the same way. I still write as a form of therapy. I still write as a way of working out what I think about the world, and the things that make me angry, the things that I love, the things that I want to change, the things I want to understand better. Still my way of putting the world to rights, which I think is why I write feel-good fiction, because I want to leave people, including myself, happier at the end than they were at the beginning.
Yeah, it sounds like you write feel-good fiction for the same reason that people read feel-good fiction, and that's probably why you write it so well as well. I was really curious as to the different process of kind of the non-fiction memoirs and then moving into the fiction stories. How different are those writing processes, or did it feel similar?
I mean, I thought it would be completely different, and in many ways it isn't, because, as I said, I sort of write for the same reasons. And also, when you get used to writing from what's in your own head, I think it makes you much more able to write from somebody else's head too.
Yeah.
Because you've had practice in sort of articulating those thoughts and feelings and sort of angst and the desires and everything. You've got used to doing that for yourself, and then it's just a matter of thinking, okay, now I'm going to put myself in the head of somebody else. How are they feeling about this? So I think for anyone who is I always tell people who are interested in writing fiction that one of the best places to start is to start by writing about your own life, and that, because have you heard often agents and publishers talk about wanting to find an author who has a unique voice, and they talk about the author's voice and how important that is. And I think what they mean by that is if you pick up a book and don't look at the cover, you just open it up and start reading a page, is that you immediately know who that author is.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know if you were reading a Jilly Cooper or a Stephen King or a Richard Osman. I mean, they have a way of talking over and above the way that their characters talk. There's a sort of tone that runs through it, which is uniquely them. And that's what publishers really love. And I think if you've written about your own life first, it helps you to find your own voice and not to write in a way that is uniquely you and isn't like trying to be somebody else. So actually I think fiction and non-fiction ideally should be closer than you think.
Yeah, interesting. And that's such good advice. If there's anyone on the call who wants to be a writer, there you go, you've got some very good advice there as well. That's brilliant. So we have had an influx of questions about your other beautiful novels as well, so I'm going to jump into some of the other other questions that people have had, starting with this question from Sam. So Sam has said that she's found you and found your writing through chapter 25 and through this Q&A today. So she's asking you to tell her which of your books she should start with.
Oh, gosh. I would start with The People on Platform 5.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Just because.
just because.
Yeah.
I think partly because the main character, who is called Iona Iverson, she's probably my favorite of all of my characters. Possibly she and Daphne sort of vie possibly for that position, but yeah, I would start with Iona because I have a big soft spot for her.
Amazing. Fab. There's been so many questions about The People on Platform 5. Let me jump in and read through some of them. What have we got here? So this question I really loved. So the journey that the characters take in The People on Platform 5 is one that my uncle takes on his daily commute. Write about this as a particular journey that you had experience with, or did you just look on a map and go, oh, there to there? Is it a journey that you've done before?
Yes, many times. So actually, I was born in East Molesey, which is right by Hampton Court. So that train line from Hampton Court to Waterloo is one that my dad used to take every morning on his commute. And many years later, when I was at school in Wimbledon, and I would take that train line from Hampton Court to Wimbledon and back again. And Iona's house in The People on Platform 5 was based on my childhood home.
Brilliant.
On a road called Hurst Road, which it runs alongside the river, and that's Iona's house. And actually, every now and again I go back to that area, and I stand outside the house, and I think I've always wanted to ring on the doorbell and say, I used to live in this house, and actually I wrote a book, and your house is in my book.
Yeah.
I've got these really big gates at the front, and it's sort of hidden behind these gates, and I'm too embarrassed to ring the bell.
No, do it.
But yeah, so that's that was Iona's house, and the funny thing is, I started writing that book in lockdown, And so I couldn't go back on the train line to see how different it was from how I remembered it in my head. And I hadn't taken that train line for, probably about 20 years. So so I waited until, I lockdown was over and I finished the book, and I thought, right, now I can get on the train and just sort of, see whether, the stations are like I remember, and whether the train itself is the way I remember. And I got on the train and I thought, bugger, they've taken the tables away.
Oh no.
Because when I used to take that train, they had those seats of 4 with a table in the middle, which is the way I've written it in the people on platform 5. But now there are no tables. And I thought, this is terrible, because so much in the book happens across the table, So in the very first chapter, Iona, always carries with her a sort of a flask of tea and a teacup and a saucer, and she puts them on the table, and there's no table for her to put them on. And so I thought, well, I have 2 choices here. Either I rewrite the book to get rid of all the tables and find a way of managing without them, or I just accept the fact that it's inaccurate. And in the end, I just added a bit to the author's note, which says, apologies, if you take this train regularly, you will know that there are no tables. But I have chosen to use fiction as a way of addressing the terrible errors that Southwest trains have made in getting rid of the tables.
Oh man, as a regular commuter, trains without tables are not the one. So maybe we can use this book as a petition to get the trains put those tables back in. Brilliant. You actually mentioned this yourself earlier, and someone's asked a question about the 2 different names that this novel has got. So in the UK, it's The People on Platform 5, and in the US, it's Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting. What was the reason behind that? This person's asking, is that they were just really curious to find out if there was reasons why it had changed.
Yeah, I didn't realize before I started publishing novels that the author is not in charge of the title. So my job is to write the best possible book, but my publisher's job is to market it. So they are in charge of getting the best possible cover, the blurb, and the title. And I think the way they see it, and I do understand this, is that, when you've written a book, you're in a way too close to it to work out how to then sell it to people who know nothing about it, and possibly know nothing about you either. What is it that is going to make somebody pick that book off the shelf in a bookshop? And they have a whole load of experience in doing that. They know their readers, they know the market, they know what's popular and what's selling well and what isn't, and all those things. I will always write a title, but often, my publishers will go, we're not sure that title really works for this book. And, can you come up with something else? And I'll write a whole lot of other titles. And sometimes they use one of my other titles. Sometimes they use one of their own. Sometimes it takes months and months to agree on a title. And the problem is that sometimes my editors in the UK and US just can't agree on the same one. And so The People on Platform 5, my original title was The Wisdom of Carriage H. That was what I wanted to call it initially. And I then wrote about 50 other titles. And eventually my UK publisher said, we really want to call it People on Platform 5, which I think I wrote, but I'm not entirely sure. And my US publishers came up with a title themselves, which was Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting. And the UK lot didn't like the US title, and the US lot didn't like the UK title. And so I ended up with 2, which has been absolute hell, to be honest. And the reason it's been really difficult is because, the world is so global now that, there are all these things like Facebook book clubs, which are huge, so often hundreds of thousands of members, and they cross all the markets. So, so you'll see somebody saying, oh, I love this book, The People on Platform 5, and somebody in the US will go, I've tried to find it and I can't find it. Or even worse, I get emails from people saying, I bought Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting and I loved it so much that I bought The People on Platform 5, and I realized it's the same book, and how could you do this to me?
Oh.
I'm really sorry. So, and every time I do a social media post, I sort of have to say, or if you're in the US, it's blah, 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 blah.
Oh,
So it is really frustrating when that happens.
Yeah.
I have said to my UK and US publishers, look, I don't mind if you don't want to use my title, but please can you at least agree
Yeah.
and not to.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I would have always assumed that the writer had control over what their
No,
work was called.
no,
That's really
no.
interesting.
Interestingly, How to Age Disgracefully was my title, and everybody loved it, and they went with it without any debate. It was just
Wow.
one of those sort of. I wasn't what I called it initially. I only came up with the title about halfway through writing it, but as soon as I did, everyone was like, "Yes, that's the title."
Yeah, it is a title that makes you want to pick it up, though. It is a title that makes you think, I could learn how to age disgracefully from this book. Amazing. Sticking with The People on Platform 5 / Iron Iverson's, whatever we want to call it. There's this really interesting question that's come through about the character Emmy in that book, who we haven't really touched on yet. And someone said that they really loved reading Emmy's story because they work in a PR agency, so could really kind of relate to Emmy's story. And they were curious to know if there was anything from your own experiences in advertising that formed that character of Emmy.
Oh, yes, good. I've never been asked that, actually. So thank you. Yes, very much so, in that I use my sort of advertising experience to inform her PR experience, and it was sort of so the agency, the way I wrote the agency was, and the sort of meetings that she had and everything was based on my experience in advertising. But also the way that she grapples with her sort of moral sense, I think, came from my experience too. So this, the worry she had about, sort of in a world where there are really, really bad things happening, how important is it whether the loo seat in an Andrex a campaign is plastic or wood, which was actually a debate that I remember having for about 2 hours once in a sort of pre-production meeting. So that was absolutely based on advertising back in the day. So yes, thank you for that question.
Amazing. A couple of other questions have come through as well, I guess, crossing over the worlds of some of your books. Jocelyn has asked, do you think Julian and Iona would get on?
Yes. In fact, in The People on Platform 5, there is a mention of Julian, because what I love doing in each of my books is what they call an Easter egg, where I will refer back to a character from a previous novel, and if you haven't read that novel, you wouldn't know, you wouldn't bat an eyelid. But if you have read it, you pick it up. And the one in The People on Platform 5 is in Iona's house, which, as I said, was based on my childhood home. And on the wall, she has a portrait of herself painted by Julian Jessup.
Oh my goodness, I didn't even put that together. That's so clever.
Yeah. So, and I loved writing that because I could just picture, and I think she talks about the fact that he was a terrible womanizer, and of course the fact that he was a bit pissed off that she was a lesbian. And I could picture, as I was writing that scene, her sitting for Julian in his studio, and the sort of banter that they would have had. And I loved the idea of them meeting each other. And then in How to Age Disgracefully, there is a mention of Iona, because at one point Daphne is watching one of Iona's sort of YouTube videos.
Yes.
So I love doing that. It's Great fun.
Brilliant. I love it, because then it does make you think about, what would that painting experience have been like with Iona and Julian in the same room? I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that.
Lydia, just as a sort of, just as not many people know this, hardly anybody knows this, Lydia crops up in my next novel.
Oh, so I want to ask you about this. You've brought it up, so I'm going to ask you. You have teased this fourth book now, your fourth fiction book, on Instagram. I believe Friends You Haven't Met Yet. Is there anything you can tell us about it? Because I'm very excited.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, it's slightly annoying news is that it's not going to be out until probably the beginning of 2027. Because they haven't found a cover yet, and it's sort of, anyway, for various reasons, it's not going to be out for a while. And I'm still editing it. But it's called Friends You Haven't Met Yet. And for the first time, again, so I've got the UK and the US who have agreed the title. So it's going to be the same title, which is great. It's set in a bookshop, actually, an independent bookshop, and the owner of the bookshop is called Jude, and she in the very first chapter, so again, it's not a spoiler, she has this little coffee area in her bookshop, and there's a girl comes in, and she's obviously on like a Tinder date, guy she's not met yet before, and it's not going terribly well. And while she's off in the loo, her date legs it, and she comes out of the loo and has a complete meltdown. And the owner of the bookshop says, look, these apps are a nightmare, and I bet I could find you a better date just based on which books you like and which books they like. And that sort of starts a whole thing where the bookshop owner starts matching people together on the basis of their book choices, but it's not necessarily a romantic thing. So in some instances, it's somebody who's looking for, somebody to go on walks around London with, or somebody who is looking for a friend for their sort of son who's on the spectrum and is obsessed by Pokemon, or so it's about the magic that can happen when two people like the same book. Oh,
I love that. I don't think I've ever read a book set in a bookshop that I haven't liked either. So that's very exciting. Oh, it's still, I'm assuming, in that kind of feel-good fiction area.
Yeah. And again, there are 5 different characters, all with slightly different, very different stories. And it's sort of, definitely feel-good fiction, community, that sort of thing.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like it's worth the wait, even if I do have to wait until 20.
Yes, I'm sorry, it's such a slow process.
No, not to worry, that sounds amazing. One of the questions that I had for you as well, just out of curiosity, so as you said, this next one's feel good fiction, and that seems to be, what you really, really love writing. Is there anything else, any other genres that you'd like to have a stab at? Anything that you could see yourself trying in the future for other novels?
Oh, well, it's weird, because I was thinking about the other day that I was trying to work out how people write things like psychological thrillers and horror books and that sort of thing, because when I'm writing a book, I have to live with my characters in my head all the time. It makes you feel slightly like you're going crazy, because you feel sort of, you have these characters jostling for attention the whole time. And if I had to live with a sort of axe murderer, or a sort of, or a sort of some sort of, serial killer or somebody in my head, I don't know what it would do to me. So I'm not sure that I could write about people that I didn't generally like. So yes, I mean, so I love the idea of writing something completely different, but at the same time, I'm not sure that I really want to. I do, however, I am toying with writing another non-fiction book.
Okay.
It's 10 years since I wrote the Sober Diaries, and I have never, until now, I haven't really wanted to write another book about my own life, but I'm really interested in writing a book about midlife and about being in that sandwich generation where you have aging parents and teenagers, and about all the menopause and all the stuff that comes around that. So I think I might write some non-fiction again at some point.
Amazing. Oh, that sounds so interesting, and you would have such a relatable topic that people would just lap up as well. So that sounds amazing. Cool. Let me go through and double check. So anyone on the call, please keep your questions coming. We've obviously got the Q&A box here in Google Meet, but we've got our Discord channel as well. So I'm just going to run through because I'm sure I've missed some questions because there's quite a few that come through. Kelly has said, Kelly loved both the Authenticity Project and the people on Platform 5, and she would love to know what it was that inspired you to write the Authenticity Project.
You know what? I mean, that's probably my most autobiographical novel, and often an author's debut is the book that is most like their own life. And I found that what really sort of saved my life when I was going through a really bad time was when I started writing Mummy Was a Secret Drinker, my blog. And I sort of told the real truth about my life, which from the outside looked like it was all sort of fairly perfect and very glossy, and everything looked lovely. And the reality was very, very different. And actually, I realized that when you are really honest about what's going on in your life, not only does it completely transform your own life, but it transforms the lives of the people that come in contact with that story. So telling your sort of authentic story changes the lives of people around you. And that was the idea behind the Authenticity Project, is what would happen if somebody told the real truth about their life, not on the internet like I did, but in a sort of old-fashioned notebook, and left that notebook somewhere for other people to find and for them to then share their own authentic truth. What magic might that lead to? And it was absolutely based on what had happened to me. And there's a character in the Authenticity Project called Hazard, who is an addict, and his story was based on my story. I mean, he's quite different from me in some ways, but the basic journey that he went through getting sober was very like mine.
Interesting. I must say, I think it was the question earlier from Sam about which of your books to start with. That would be my recommend. The Authenticity Project is
really
hands down my favorite of yours, and I think it's because it's that idea of that kind of comparison perfect life. I feel like it's just becoming ever more relevant. Like, I mean, I did it today. I scrolled through Instagram and I was like, oh, I'm not on a beach somewhere like these people are. Like it's just, and you're surrounded by it all the time, and I think it's such an important topic.
The number of times I will find myself looking at somebody's sort of Instagram and thinking, oh God, their life is so amazing. And then I'll see them a few weeks later and they'll say, oh, one of my close relatives has just died, and I'm about to lose my job. And I sort of think, oh my God, I was sort of just a few weeks ago, I was thinking how perfect your life was. And it's just, when you dig beneath the surface, everybody is struggling with something. And it's really important to remember that, because otherwise, you end up feeling like you're the only person whose life isn't always great. Our children, I feel sorry for, because they are, they're growing up with this constant sort of barrage of perfection, and and that's just it's not good for your mental health. It really is
completely inescapable. Agree. Going back to the people at Platform 5, someone here has asked, well, they've said, sorry, not about the people at Platform 5, they said they loved reading that book, and they are curious to know what the editing process looks like for you.
Gosh, well, there's several stages to it, really. So I mean, the original edits I do myself, and so I often talk to people about, when you're writing a novel, it feels to me like painting landscape, in that initially you do this really rough pencil sketch, so you get the perspective right, and you know what goes where, and you know what the whole thing is going to look like. And then once you've done that initial sketch, which is for me the first edit, a very rough draft and very, very sketchy draft, then you layer on all the light and the shade and the color and the depth and the textures and the interest, and that you layer and layer and layer until the whole thing comes together in a much more vivid, interesting way. So that for me is what the editing process feels like. It's that constant layering. And as you do that, you find out more and more about your characters' backstories. You find out about their little quirks and their little habits, and you add all of that texture in. And then once you're happy with it, it goes off to my publishers, and then they wade in with their edits. And it's slightly complicated with me because I'm published in the US and the UK simultaneously. My editors have to agree their edit notes first, and then those come to me, and then I work on them, and we go through several stages: the structural edits, which are the big ones, the line edits, which are much more detailed, the copy edits, which are even more detailed, and then the proofreading. So it's sort of, it's a long process, hence the long timelines.
Does that process, and I'm not a writer, but from my perspective as an outsider, can that process become quite disheartening, especially when you've talked about living with these characters and loving a lot of these characters? Can it be a bit disheartening to then it comes back and it's been a bit pulled to shreds, maybe, or is it okay?
It always is initially. So you initially read the notes and you just want to scream and then cry. And I've learned that the best thing to do is not do anything. So I read them sort of almost at arm's length, and then I put them in a drawer and I wait for 2 days until I've sort of let it settle, and then I go back and read them again. And having thought about it for a while, I'll read them and think, oh yeah, actually they've got a point, and yes, that would make more sense, and yes, that perhaps that doesn't work as well as I thought. And it's very rare that I disagree with anything my editors have said once I've had a chance to digest it, because again, it's about being able to see it from a distance. And they're really experienced. They've edited so many books over the years, and they're able to see in a way that I'm sometimes too close to a book to be able to see, where some things may not be explained enough, some things may be dragging, some things may not feel real enough. So yeah, and the advantage of that stage is that you're not on your own anymore. It feels suddenly like you're all in it together, and it's a joint project and it's not just you.
Yeah.
So in a way, I like the editing process more than the initial draft. The initial draft is the hardest because you're constantly fighting with your own self-doubt. As you're writing, you constantly have this voice saying, oh, this isn't as good as your last book. Nobody's going to like this one, and you're saying, shut up.
Oh yeah, that team effort, like you said, writing can probably be quite a lonely place. So yeah, that team effort I can imagine is a bit more uplifting for sure. There's a question here from Sarah, which is really interesting, and she said that she loves your writing style where each character has a chapter, that kind of multiple point of view, and she's just asked, where did that idea come from?
Oh, it came from writing the Authenticity Project, and now it's sort of become my thing, and each of my books now uses that same structure because I really like writing that way. I like flipping from the perspective of one person to another because it allows me to play with that thing of expectation versus reality. So I love being able to play with what one character sees versus what another character might see. So like the way in The People on Platform 5, everybody has a different view of Iona, which says more about them than it does about her. So yeah, but it came from writing the Authenticity Project because I wanted the book, that story was based on the idea of each person writing in this book and passing the book on. It sort of had to be written from the perspective of the different characters as they found the notebook. So that led to that structure, and then that structure was one I really enjoyed and I've held on to. So whereas with each of my novels, the basic idea changes, all the characters are completely different, and the sort of, you know, the story is very different, the structure is exactly the same.
Yeah, it definitely feels like, where you were saying earlier about the author's voice, it feels like that is a quintessential Clare Pooley. You pick it up and you've kind of got that structure and that style to it. It feels very, very you now. So
yeah, thank you.
Amazing. We've got a really lovely message here from Mimi. So Mimi put, how to age disgracefully. She said, thank you for your writing. How to age disgracefully especially touched my heart. And as I finished the last chapter, I couldn't help but cry a little. It's such an incredible book. And then she's asked, do you think we'll ever see any of these characters again? Would you ever write a sequel or bring them back?
You know, I mean, I see them all the time. Every time I go for a walk in Brompton Cemetery, which I do about twice a week, I see my authenticity character sitting on the Admiral's gravestone having so, and you know, every time I go to a station, I see the people on Platform 5 crew. So, you know, so yeah, I mean, they're certainly there in my head. I mean, I would love to write, you know, I'd love to write a book at some point which pulls together a number of different characters from the different books, all based in London. But I would do it in a way such that you wouldn't have had to have met them before.
Yeah.
To know who they were. But yeah, I'm not sure. I would need to make sure that I wasn't just doing it as a self-indulgent sort of, you know, sort of fantasy, and that it was an interesting enough story in its own right.
Definitely. So, yeah. Maybe if they start shouting a particular plot line or story at you, maybe that's when you'll know. Very good question here from Nadia. So she said you're her favorite author. Your books have made her laugh out loud and cry her eyes out, maybe at the same time, who knows. She has asked, if you were approached to take one of your novels to the big screen, would you, and if so, which one?
Oh, that's such a good question, because that is my big dream.
Is it?
And it's funny, when one of the things I find difficult is the fact that you have to keep reminding yourself in life, I think, to celebrate the things that you have achieved and not to constantly look at what you haven't yet achieved. And, you know, I always try to remind myself that once upon a time, my big dream was to publish a novel. And I've done that. And, you know, that really should be enough, because that was all I'd ever wanted to do. But of course, you then set yourself the next thing. Well, now I want to be a New York Times bestseller, and now I want to be sort of, you know, I want to I don't know, sort of, you know, and for me, the next big thing, what I would really love to do is see one of my books as a film or as a TV series, because, you know, I mentioned earlier that when the way I write is to play forward the scene in my head like a movie, and the idea of seeing that actually come to life as a movie would be just it would be such a dream. It really would be an amazing experience. Yeah, I would love that. And the truth is, I keep selling options to my books. So the Authenticity Project was under option. So a production company came back to me and is now under option to another one. The People on Platform 5 is also under option, and I'm just negotiating the option for How to Age Disgracefully. But what I learned, you know, I've learned over the years, is that optioning a book doesn't mean it's going to actually happen. So you have these meetings with these Hollywood producers, and it gets really exciting, and they say, oh, we're thinking about Helen Mirren for Daphne, and you go, oh yes, I want Helen Mirren to be Daphne.
Yes.
And you know, it all seems really exciting, and you picture yourself on the red carpet, and it's all sort of, and then everything goes very quiet, and, you know, sort of nothing happens. And the truth is that only about 10% of things that are books that are optioned ever make it to the big screen, because there are so many hurdles you have to jump through. They need to find the right writer, they need to find their funding, they need to find the right cast, they need, at any stage it can all go tits up. So until you get to what they call green light, which is when all the pieces are in place and they press the button to start, the camera's rolling, you never know whether or not it's going to happen. But hopefully one day, I would love that.
Yeah, I think they just lend themselves to that big screen, because the multiple characters, the beautiful storylines, it does just lend itself to being on the screen. Are there any that you would be even more excited? Like, is there any that you would love to see on the screen more than the others, or is it just any and all of them?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to see any of them, but I think maybe because it was the Authenticity Project. And I sort of feel like we need more films like that, because I think life is really tough right now. There's all sorts of really awful things happening in the world, and I think we need to get away from it all, and having happy stories and stories about the things that really matter, and about community and and authenticity are, I think, what we need personally.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I don't want to keep banging on about it, but it's the simplicity of that story as well. Like the fact that it doesn't need a big Hollywood unbelievable storyline to it. It just needs people and a notebook, and away you go. Like, it's just the simplicity of it as well, which I love. Fabulous. Keep your questions coming through, people. I think there was another one that I saw that I'd missed. So Sarah's asked a question, and I'm not sure how to ask it without giving big spoilers. So if anyone's not read How to Age Disgracefully, maybe just put things in your ears for a minute. So she's got a question about Lydia in How to Age Disgracefully. So she said, so Lydia manages to finally get her revenge on her husband, but the impression was that it was only taken as far as Lydia would be comfortable with, whereas characters like Daphne, she imagines, would go a lot further. Was that done with Lydia's feelings in mind, or kind of where did that revenge idea come from?
I really wanted Jeremy to get his just desserts. However, I think there's a point with revenge where if you're not careful, you end up being just as culpable as the person that did the bad thing in the first place. You know what I mean? So I think it was just like a personal thing that I sort of feel like, if you take revenge too far, you end up also being the bad person. And so I tried to tread a line whereby, he ended up realizing that he'd been that he was getting Lydia was getting her own back, but in a way that sort of still kept the moral high ground with the right people, if that makes sense.
It's a difficult line to tread, absolutely. And you still want to love Lydia at the end of it, even though you want her to get that revenge. You want her to do it in a way that you can still love her and root for her through all of that as well. So tricky line. Cool. We have only got a couple of minutes left, so I have got a couple of questions I was going to wrap up with, which actually, ironically, are also questions that Jess and Alexander Veronica have asked as well. So, two birds and all that. So Alexander Veronica has asked about any advice that you've got for new writers. So she said, specifically when writing a sort of own life story told through a third person, kind of like an alter ego perspective, what steps would you take to get that kind of work out there in the world?
Okay, one of my main pieces of advice for new writers is to not worry too much about your first draft. So going back to what I said about the first draft is very much like the pencil sketch. So, and most new writers never get to the end of the first draft because they are so busy worrying about whether what they're writing is good enough that they end up sort of giving up partway through. And the truth is, first drafts are always awful. So just to the end, and then you can work out what you've got, and then you can make it good. So, which comes on to my second piece of advice, really, which is edit, edit, edit. So do the first draft quickly. Don't worry about it too much. Just get to the end, and then just rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until you're really happy with it. And it really helps to. There's a great book which I recommend by Stephen King called On Writing, which is part his sort of autobiography, but it's also part a sort of how-to guide for writers, and it's really has some really helpful advice. And he talks about putting your book in a drawer for at least 6 weeks, and then coming back to it, and at which point you with a bit more distance, you can read it more like a reader and less like the author, and that will really help with the editing process, because you can read, when you come back and look at it again, you think you've got a completely fresh perspective on it. So yes, now remind me, there were some details about what sort of book.
Yeah, so she's saying that she's written an own life story told through a third person, so from a sort of alter ego perspective, which sounds really interesting.
But I that sounds sort of like you are writing fiction, but based on your own experience. And I guess I think that's a really good place to start with writing a novel, because, you know, they say write what you know, and it's going to feel more authentic if it is based on your own experience. But just be careful not to make it too much like yourself. So you want to sort of remember it is fiction.
Yeah. Amazing, good advice. Also, just for anyone in the call, I've been noting down some of the books that Claire's been mentioning as she's been chatting. I'm going to put some Goodreads links in the Discord chat. So yeah, the Stephen King one that she mentioned, I'll put some links to that in the Discord chat as well. So Claire, my last question for you, because it's almost 9 o'clock. This has gone so fast. And this was also a question that Jess had as well. And I've seen you do this quite regularly on Instagram. So yeah, if anyone doesn't follow Claire on Instagram, highly recommend this. Well, what are you reading at the moment? Are there any go-to authors that you really love? Give us some recommendations. You know, we're all bookish people. We all want to know what each other are reading. So yeah, what would you recommend?
Oh, recently, well, at the moment I'm reading Broken Country by Clare. Can't remember her surname offhand.
Leslie Hall.
Yes, which I'm really enjoying, but I'm only about halfway through.
Okay.
But really enjoying that. But some of my recent reads that I've loved are, I don't know if anyone has read The Wedding People yet, but that is one of my favorites. Really fun, really funny. Also, Margot's Got Money Troubles. Completely different book. It's about a woman who is a single mother, and to make ends meet, she starts doing OnlyFans. And I knew nothing about OnlyFans in this book, and now I know quite a lot about OnlyFans, probably more than I want to. Anyway, really recommend that. It's great fun. So that was brilliant. And so those are two of my recent ones. I'm trying to think what else. It came out a while ago, but I only recently got round to it. The Lion Women of Tehran. I really loved. Have you read that?
Yeah, so we just read that actually. So all of the chapter 25 hosts, we have our own little book club, and that was what we've just read for our own book club. And that was I really loved that book. That really got me. I can't stop thinking about those characters. They were brilliant.
Yeah, and I love books that take you to a place and to a time of history that you weren't that familiar with, and make you think about things in a different way. With that book absolutely does, about the way that women over time have been treated in Iran was really fascinating. So those are some of my recent favorites.
Amazing. Some good recommendations there. Are you the kind of person that will just read anything? Do you have some go-to genres or authors, or is it just whatever? Are you a mood reader?
I think like you, I see a lot of recommendations via sort of Instagram and Facebook, and just the sort of, you know, what people in the book world are chatting about a lot, and I tend to pick books because I know that they're causing discussion, you know, that people are talking about them for whatever reason. And I find that sort of, and it doesn't matter what genre they are, it's just a case of, so I'll read things like, you know, I loved Rebecca Yarros's Fourth Wing and Flame, and, you know, which aren't my genre at all, you know, sort of dragons and hot sex and stuff, you know, which is just not what I would normally read, but I thought, look, everyone is talking about these books, I have to read them, and I really enjoyed them. So yes, I tend to follow where the buzz is, if you see what I mean. And often, you know, even if it's not the sort of book that you would have picked up, often those are books that are really interesting for one reason or another.
Definitely. And that's, for me, that was why I wanted to get involved in chapter 25, because the types of stuff that I'm reading now is just exploded. I'm reading things that I'm reading and loving things that I just never ever would have picked up originally. So yeah.
What are you reading at the moment?
So we've just, our most recent read for the Cambridge Book Club was Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books, which I really enjoyed.
Oh no, I haven't read that yet.
But it's very good. It's quite nice and short. Kind of, I flew through that quite quickly. Quite a nice, easy writing style as well. One of the ones as well, this is another chapter 25 read that I absolutely loved, was Clytemnestra, and this is a prime example of like a Greek mythology retelling. I never would have picked that up. But then, read it for the book club and absolutely loved it. And she's got a Q&A at the end of the month as well. And I've got so many questions that I want to ask about that book.
Because I don't often read that sort of book, but I loved Song of Achilles, which was fantastic. And then one of my daughters is really into Greek myths, so we did all of the Stephen Fry retellings. We were sort of, you know, on a road trip recently, so I love the fact that those are all coming back.
Definitely, absolutely. Oh, Claire, I could talk to you for another hour and a half. This has been so lovely. Thank you so much for your time. And even though you are making us wait, I'm still very excited for book number 5 to come out, and any other reads that you've got coming up as well. Thank you to everyone who has joined us and asked us such brilliant questions, and hopefully when the next one comes out, Claire, we can do another Q&A all about that one as well. Fingers crossed.
And thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, brilliant. Have a lovely evening, Claire, and everyone else. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.